So this is now live. Priyanshu, you can start now. Sir is also there, and speaker Professor Dr. Badri Narayan is also there. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. So I'm beginning.
Yeah, please start.
Yes, ma'am. A very good morning to respected principal, sir, honorable guest speaker, Dr. B. N. Gopalakrishnan, the convener, and our esteemed professors of the Department of Economics. Today, I, Avi Prabhakar, President of the Finance and Investment Cell, Atmaram Sanatan Dharm College, present to you the culmination of Econ Dialogues, a series of 4 engaging sessions, with our revered speaker, Dr. B. N. Gopalakrishnan, delivering the last key session on the aftermath of COVID-19 on trade and investment. Before we begin, I'd like to take this chance to share with you the news that Atmaram Sanatan Dharm College, under Professor Gyantosh Kumar Jha, our dynamic and visionary principal, has led the college to a national ranking as the 10th best college in the nation for the year 2022. A platform for students to polish both the academic and non-academic life skills has been crucially provided by ARSD College under the guidance of our beloved principal, sir. This news comes with the occasion of University of Delhi completing a centennial, that is 100 years of providing quality education and raising the future of our country. FICARSD has risen to seize the first glimmer of light, much like the sun, which ushers in a new day of aspirations, hope, and dreams. We will keep all the commitments that have been made previously, backed by the most brilliant members with groundbreaking abilities in all fields, particularly in the sphere of finance and investment, and a new motivated force in the form of the core team of 2022 and 2023. So let's start ourselves off for today's discussions, which shall be on the topic of the changes brought into effect in trade and investment by COVID-19 and the ramifications of disruptions in supply chains which distorted market results and led to a recalibration of traditional investment routes and habits globally, and analyze its effects in the Indian context. I now request Ms. Kavita Bangarwa, Assistant Professor, Department of Economics, to proceed ahead with the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Avi Prabhakar. Good morning, everyone. On behalf of Finance and Investment Cell, I, Kavita Bangarwa, welcome you all on the last day of the speaker session. We have successfully organized a series of speaker sessions where our distinguished speakers have enlightened us about the ramifications of COVID-19 pandemic. If I recall, starting from the beginning, Professor Dipankar Sen Gupta, University of Jammu, enlightened us about the education for the knowledge economy in the post-COVID world. Dr. Sujit Das, JNU, talked about the macroeconomic impact of COVID-19, whereas Dr. Anjali Tandon, Institute of Studies in Industrial Development, enlightened us about the post-pandemic India, prognosis, and way forward. I welcome our speaker, Dr. Badri Narayan Gopalakrishnan, Head of Trade, Commerce, and Strategic Economic Dialogue at Niti Aayog, who will deliver a lecture on how did COVID-19 change trade and investment. Before introducing our speaker to all of you, I would like to welcome our visionary principal, Sir, Professor Gyantosh Kumar Jha, under whose dynamic leadership our college is doing extremely well, and would also like to welcome Dr. Vinita Tuli Ma'am, IQAC Coordinator. I would now like to invite Principal Sir to say a few words. Sir.
Thank you, Kavita Bangarwa. Honorable Dr. Badri Narayan Gopalakrishnan, today's guest speaker and Head Trade and Commerce Niti Aayog, Dr. Apara Sinha, Convener Finance and Investment Cell of the college, other colleagues, and my dear students. On behalf of Atmaram Sanatan Dharm College, it is a great pleasure for me to welcome Honorable Dr. Badri Narayan Gopalakrishnan in this session for delivering a talk today on how COVID-19 has changed trade and investment. I am thankful to you, sir, that you have given your valuable time for us. I believe that COVID-19 has affected global economy. We have seen its effects on global trade in goods, trade in services, and foreign direct investments. Moreover, the impact of COVID-19 pandemic are heterogeneous across industries and type of investments their magnitude is also different. It is very important to understand the causes and consequences, their magnitude, and consequences of supply chain disruptions, and discuss challenges associated with restoring production. With this background, I welcome once again Dr. Badri Narayan and thank him very much for giving his valuable time for the students and teachers. I congratulate FIC team for organizing this kind of session in collaboration with IQAC of the college under the aegis of Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav and the centenary celebration of Delhi University. You are doing a good job, so keep it up. Thank you so much. All the best. Thank you, sir. Thank you for joining.
Thank you, sir, for your motivating words. Moving ahead, the COVID-19 pandemic has made the last 2 years challenging for the global economy. Worldwide, trade in goods and services, as well as foreign direct investment, have been significantly reduced by the COVID-19, particularly in the second quarter of 2020. The negative impact of COVID-19 are magnified, especially in areas like exports, imports, supplies, and investment in host countries. However, such impacts of pandemic are heterogeneous across industries and types of investment. Today, we have Dr. Badri Narayan Gopalkrishnan, an expert in this field, amongst us to enlighten us on how COVID-19 changed trade and investment. Dr. Badri Narayan is currently Head of Trade, Commerce and Strategic Economic Dialogue at Niti Aayog. He is PhD from IGIDR, Mumbai, and is an economist focusing on variety of quantitative economic and interdisciplinary models to analyze a wide range of economics, mainly international trade, environmental energy, and public health policies. He is currently affiliated with the School of Environmental and Forestry Science at the University of Washington. He has published over 100 papers and 5 books in reputed journals such as Energy Economics, Network and Spatial Economics, Economic Modeling, and Applied Economics, and presented his work in over 30 countries across the world. I would like to invite Dr. Badri Narayan, sir, to deliver the talk. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bangarwa, for the nice introduction, and Professor Jha for the welcome address, and Dr. Apra for inviting me. And I should also take this opportunity to apologize for missing the previous scheduled session for some unavoidable reasons. I'm very thankful that many of you have come again to listen to me. Thank you very much again. So the topic that I'll be talking about today is the broad impact of COVID on trade and investment. Usually I talk based on some research that I've done or some analytical work, modeling, and so on. But today I decided that I'll talk more conceptually and more at a high level what is happening in terms of trade and investment. The reason is that there is a lot of work being done in this area, and quantitatively, analytically, a lot of research has been going on. I've also done some work in this area recently. However, it's more important to look at the higher level changes that are happening, the structural realignments and changes that are happening now, rather than getting into the analytical and the quantitative aspects, mainly because we need more information, more data to be very confident in this analysis. So let me start talking about particularly the trade related aspects, global trade related aspects. The first thing that comes to our mind when we think about global supply chain, global trade in the context of COVID is the the geopolitical changes that have been happening in the past couple of years. So the geopolitical changes that are happening, they are because of several reasons. The broad change that is happening is the aversion of most countries in the world, many countries in the world, to trade in general, and a trade that is kind of concentrated in a bunch of countries in particular. So, in other words, countries have experienced a lot of uncertainties in the last couple of years in terms of supply chain bottlenecks, in terms of logistical and transportation difficulties, and also in terms of the policies that affect exports and imports on both sides, on the exporters side and also from the importer side. So all these different uncertainties, they have resulted in kind of aversion for trade. Another important factor that has happened recently is the broad economic contraction that has happened across the world, which in turn resulted in loss of jobs and reduction in income further. And it's kind of a vicious circle that happened, particularly in 2020, with some recovery in the last 2 years, 21 and 22. However, this again has forced many countries to rethink the trade strategy. Many countries started prioritizing their domestic industry before trade. So these are certain reasons. One is purely a supply chain related reason. Another is more of a reason that that pertains to jobs and income. So because of all these thought processes, countries have started becoming a little guarded when it comes to global trade. And I'm talking about the world in general. I'm not yet talking about India. So far I'm talking about the global situation. So in this context, so the broad reduction in the focus on trade by many countries because of various reasons, right? That is the main reason here is geopolitical. The second aspect is the term that has become very popular in the past couple of years. That is supply chain resilience. Every country in the world wants to have a strong resilience to various shocks that happen to supply chain. And I just talked about the different shocks, the uncertainties that happen because of supply chain. So now many countries want to have resilience. And again, this has been an explicit factor in terms of dialogue that is happening globally, bilaterally, within the country and so on when it comes to international trade. So supply chain resilience is an important aspect. So these are two broad aspects happening globally: geopolitical developments and supply chain resilience. Because of these two broad developments, countries are thinking about changing their export sources, or also changing their investment destinations, also changing their partnerships in terms of trade and investment. And all these are quite interrelated. So we all know that the whole global supply chain has been quite closely related to countries like China. And many countries are now thinking of alternative countries because of the reasons that I just mentioned. One thing is about, I mainly talked about the increased focus of countries to reduce dependence on trade. And the second aspect is to reduce dependence on trade, in particular with countries like China, which have been dominating. It is notwithstanding the political realignments, the strategic aspects, and so on, security strategic aspects, and so on. I would also highlight the fundamental economic positioning of which happens at a household level, at a firm level, and at a country level, which is risk diversification. So they don't want all eggs in one basket. So all the countries, they want to have multiple sources from where they can source, multiple investment partners, multiple trade partners, and so on. So this is the context that is important to understand globally. And very rapidly things have changed in the past couple of years. And pandemic has triggered this. And all this did not start one fine day, but it has been happening over time. Before the pandemic, gradually this kind of discussions were happening, these kinds of thought processes were evolving. But during the pandemic, I remember when I had some discussions with my friends in the industry, particularly in like textile industry, apparel industry, and other engineering industries, prior to the pandemic, in the sense, talking about something like February, March 2020, when a pandemic wasn't yet there in India. It was not yet a pandemic. It was a disease that was really creating havoc in certain regions in China, not all of China, but mainly the Wuhan area. So even at that time, all these things that I'm talking about had begun, not necessarily at a policy level, but at an industry level. So the industrialists were thinking about how do we get out of the situation where the entire supply chain is stuck, because Wuhan region in China is a major industrial powerhouse, and many industrialists in India were quite dependent on China for inputs. So I'm talking about this textile and apparel industries, in which we have a lot of self-sufficiency. We have a lot of competitiveness. We produce a lot. However, they were dependent on China for very basic things like the packaging materials, the buttons, and so on. And that was a very difficult situation to be in. And that's when the industrialists started thinking, at least I'm talking at a very, very micro level, the people that I knew, and both in India and in US, they were beginning to discuss, think about the possibility of multiple sources of imports. Why should we all depend on just one or two countries? Why don't we think of more countries? And also, why don't we develop the capacity within our country, within India? So that's a very important shift that happened even at an industry level, even at a micro level, which later on also got picked up by the policymakers. So I think that's a context I want to set broadly. And this is all happening even before the pandemic started in a full-fledged way. So given this, your question, some of you may ask me, what is it that, how is it that India responding to that to these changes in trade and investment globally? The very first thing is we definitely have a very positive endeavor to take advantage of the situation where every country is looking for alternative partners, both in terms of trade and in terms of investment. So there is no question about that. We are very much desirous of taking that position, which is popularly known as this China plus one strategy that many countries are taking up. And we want to be that plus one. It's not a secret. Everyone knows we are very, very actively pursuing that. How do we pursue that? And that is a context in which several policy initiatives come into picture. So we have the Self-Reliant India, Atmanirbhar Bharat, which is widely construed as an inward-looking set of policies, but that is not true. Even the Honorable Prime Minister has several times mentioned that this is to be self-reliant and at the same time plug into the global supply chains, global value chain. So we want to cater to the rest of the world. So wherever we can produce, wherever we have the capacity, wherever we have endowments, wherever we have competitiveness, we should take the fullest advantage of that and produce. And we should import. We should be open to imports whenever we definitely cannot develop capacity. We don't have the competitiveness and efficiency. And we should be looking for export markets. We have to plug into the global supply chain, global value chain. That is a broader spirit of Atmanirbhar Bharat, and that is a fundamental policy change or fundamental, I would say, paradigm shift in our thought process, wherein we started welcoming foreign investments, which already started happening with the Make in India and other efforts before, improving our business climate, investment climate, which is always a continuous work in progress. And so that gives you an idea of what we are doing in terms of promoting investments in India, attracting investments to India, boosting our capacity, boosting our competitiveness. And many of you are aware of many other schemes. Many of them are being evolved, still evolving, like production linked incentive scheme and so on. So that is the first thing, is to boost capacity, boost scales, because our main issue over the years is the lack of scale. We don't have enough scale of production in many sectors, and which is the main reason why we are not competitive enough. So boosting scale is very important, and that is why we are looking at all these different schemes in terms of investment climate, attracting foreign investments, and so on. The second very important thing that we have to do, and we are doing, is to improve our export markets, or improve our access to various export markets. And many of you may have seen what is happening in terms of free trade agreements. We are negotiating several preferential trade agreements, free trade agreements with many countries. A couple of them have very recently concluded, UAE and Australia, and they are going with a very rapid pace. And it has never happened before. Like in the past few decades, our free trade agreements have been negotiated for several years without any logical conclusion. But now we are working on a timeline basis. So that is important. And what I would say in this context, in terms of free trade agreements, is that any open trade policy that we can develop with major partner countries is going to serve two purposes. One purpose is to provide us access to markets where we can export more. Many of these partner countries may have high tariffs, and those tariffs can come down, the custom duties, or they may have high non-tariff barriers. And now with mutual recognition agreements and so on, we can reduce those kind of barriers. Secondly, So this is the first one is more about export market access. The second one is import ease of importing. So because of these free trade agreements, on our side also we reduce tariffs. So now, for example, with Australia, we have reduced tariffs on a lot of minerals. So now we can import a lot of minerals from Australia, which can be inputs to a lot of our other sectors, manufacturing and other sectors. So on both sides, on one hand, you are increasing your export market access, and on the other hand, you are reducing your input costs by reducing the import tariffs. Now, why are free trade agreements important for India? They are important because the whole world, globally, the entire world has been going towards, in addition to pursuing WTO, which I'll talk about in a minute, World Trade Organization, the multilateral negotiations, and so on. Many countries have been working out the the bilateral trade strategy. So how do we get access to markets in specific countries in as opposed to the global multilateral system? India has been a strong proponent of rules-based, transparent, international trading system, trading regime. So we are a strong proponent of World Trade Organization. We have not been that much supportive of regional trade agreements. We want to put all our energy into the WTO. However, the entire world, particularly the developed countries to begin with, the US, EU, and others, they have started negotiating a lot of free trade agreements, starting from NAFTA in the US, US, Mexico, Canada, and the European Union itself, and the expansion of European Union, and the several free trade agreements that European Union signed with many other countries, like in North America, in South America, in Asia, and so on. So that led, because of all these trade agreements, we were a little left out, basically. So all these countries had what you call as noodle bowl kind of arrangements. They had a lot of trading arrangements happening, but we are left out everywhere. We don't have that kind of market, except a couple. We did have a free trade agreement with ASEAN, for example, with Japan, with some countries like that, Singapore, and so on. But we didn't have any other major agreements. So in the recent past, we have started very aggressively pursuing free trade agreements, and we are taking efforts to make sure that the negotiations are done properly, and we do not compromise anything that is important for our sectors, domestic sectors. We don't want to give away too many concessions to the partner countries. At the same time, we have to get the maximum from the partner countries. So that has been the spirit. And with this, in my opinion, what happens is that you are minimizing the losses that were happening because of being left out of the trading system. Now, by pursuing all these trade agreements, we are capturing the lost ground in terms of trade globally. So it's very, very essential. The free trade agreements are very important and essential. The next aspect I wanted to discuss is the World Trade Organization. So I did touch upon it a minute ago when I talked about the free trade agreements. We have always been a major proponent and supporter of World Trade Organization. And however, the World Trade Organization has been over time weakened, and many of the, particularly the developed countries, started paying less attention to WTO and push more trade agreements bilaterally and in trading blocks. So, but in this regard, if you are following the news, you might have seen that we have had a major improvement in that regard, wherein the WTO has now become highly relevant again, because a very productive 2022 ministerial conference happened, the MC12, 12th ministerial conference. And it has been a lot of important agreements happen there. Broad topics have been, health, food security, and reform. So there has been in India has been pushing for reforms, and the appellate body, particularly the appellate body, being active again, because it has become dormant, as actually the US did not agree to appoint new judges since 2020. So that and many other aspects had been discussed, giving the whole organization a strong boost in terms of reforms. Then in terms of pandemic response, again, this is one of the initiatives by India. We were able to convince that the vaccine patterns can be overridden for a few years, until I think around 2027. However, of course, there are many more things that could have been done, like, for example, therapeutics and diagnostics. For them, this IP relaxation has been delayed. The discussion on that has been delayed by 6 months. Of course, there are many things that can be done, but this is another major thing. In terms of e-commerce, the taxing or imposing tariffs on electronic transmissions, there is a moratorium on that, and that is going to continue for 2 more years, which is again at least some clarity there. And similarly, in terms of agriculture and food security, we all agreed, all the members agreed to have minimally trade destructive, temporary, target and transparent food security measures. So we won't actually do prohibition or restriction of food exports, imports, and so on, particularly when it comes to humanitarian purposes, World Food Program, and so on. So this is very, very important. Again, fishery subsidies is another area where there was some agreement. So there are a lot of such interesting things happen, and we played an important role. India played an important role in pushing all these aspects. Whenever we discuss about these negotiations, we have to take into consideration 2 things. One thing is, particularly in the context of WTO or also in the context of other trade agreements. One thing is we have to make progress. We cannot be obstructive. And at the same time, the second, even more important thing is we cannot compromise on the basic principles. We have to ensure things like food security and also national security and inclusive development, and so on. So that what I feel is that we have done a good job in striking a balance between these 2. We want progress in WTO. We have made some progress this time, and at the same time, we don't want to give up our basic requirements. Again, I'm talking about this in the context of pandemic, because a lot of the agenda in WTO was actually driven by pandemic. So the way we are thinking about trade is changing, because of pandemic, and it's a huge kind of consideration to the global trade community that the WTO has become active once again, and people are making important decisions in that forum with all the countries together. Because when I started the discussion now, I mentioned about the pessimism that has grown in the context of trade globally. And that pessimism has been attacked by all these negotiations. And instead of thinking of trade as a barrier to prosperity, barrier to jobs, and so on, we have now come to a situation where we say trade is the solution, not the problem. And that is a big move globally and for India as well. So and in India also, as I discussed earlier, we are now approaching trade in a very positive way. We want to gain from trade, and we want to be cautious about the difficulties, but at the same time we have to march forward and be positive. So those are the things. But finally, I want to talk about digital aspects, digital technologies, digital transformation, and so on. Again, COVID has accelerated that. Before COVID, even this kind of webinars, seminars were not possible. I mean, we were not even thinking about that. Skype was there, but Skype was typically used for one-on-one discussions, maximum 3-4 people. So this kind of a large forum where a lot of people can sit together and discuss, learn from each other, it was unthought of, not even thought of before. So that's an example that we are looking at right now here. But in general, the digital transformation has been pretty huge in the last few years, last couple of years particularly. Rapid transformation, things that we would expect to be happening in the next 5-10 years, we were able to achieve them within 1-2 years. So that's a huge change. Even in terms of digital transactions, UPI was a major development which happened even before pandemic, but during pandemic it accelerated further. So many of these things happen. So digital transformation is a major part of the post-pandemic story, which also affects trade and investment, definitely, because that positions India as an attractive investment destination and trade partner for many countries, because we have had all this transformation already here. So now the rest of the world is also going towards this transformation, and we can be a very proactive, constructive partner in that process. We can provide technologies. We can even be part of some of these investments, where the rest of digital transformation, the rest of the world can be facilitated by us. So now, I've mostly talked about the positive aspects of trade and investment and digitalization and so on. So now let me also discuss a little bit about the pitfalls that one can think about. So I already mentioned that in terms of trade, it's going to be positive when you open up trade, but there also could be there will be some losses and some losers when you open up. And the same thing goes for the digital technologies also. So both in terms of trade and digital technologies, during the transformation, there can be sectors that may lose, there may be people that may lose, there may be industries that may lose, and so on. So here I want to discuss a little bit on how do we tackle this issue, where we all may agree and we all may know that at a macro level, at a broad level, there is going to be gains coming from trade, gains coming from digital technologies, technological transformation, and so on. However, there are going to be gainers and losers. So a very fundamental principle of dealing with this, in my opinion, would be to directly address the losers in terms of trade, in terms of digital transformation. We have to make sure that the losers are taken care of. The people, the industries, the sectors who are losing should be taken into confidence, and some kind of compensatory mechanisms has to be have to be thought of, or even better, while we design all these technological changes or trade policy changes, trade agreements, and so on, they're already taken into consideration. So these losses are already taken into consideration, and we make sure that their losses are to the minimum. And this is how we negotiate. When we negotiate in terms of trade, in terms of investments, in terms of even in terms of policies for digital technologies and so on, we negotiate very carefully so that the losses are to the minimum. And I think, and we have been doing an important good job in that. We do a lot of stakeholder discussions. We see who is going to lose in where, in which area, and we do a lot of calibration in terms of policy, how losses can be minimized based on inputs from a wide range of industries and wide range of academics and analysts and so on. So that's very, very important, and that is the most crucial aspect when it comes to any change in trade policy, any change in technological policy. The reason I say that is because if you don't do that, then the whole trade policy and the whole technological change is going to be blamed for the losses. So I'll give you an example. If you talk to a citizen walking on the street about trade, it is quite likely that they may say that I don't like imports. Why? Because a lot of these are coming from countries like China, and they are stealing away our domestic industries, domestic jobs, and that's going to affect you and me, individuals, our income, our savings, our jobs. This is the very fundamental narrative that gets created if we do not take into account the losses coming from trade. And exactly the same thing I can talk in terms of technology. If you talk to a man or woman walking in the street, ask them, how will you benefit from robotics? How will you benefit from artificial intelligence? How would you benefit from digital transformation? They may very well say that, oh, these are very scary. I'm just an ordinary person and I'm doing a very menial kind of job, and these technologies can take over my job. Right? And there is some reason, there is some justification in both these things. The person who talked about trade, the person who talked about technology, there is, to some extent, they are justified. And why are they justified? That's because there have been losses in the past in these sectors which had not been addressed, properly. So I think as policymakers, we have to think about these vulnerable parts of the population, parts of the industries, who are likely to lose in terms of trade and in terms of technology. And if they are taken care of, then they themselves will become the supporters of trade policy. They themselves will become supporters of technological. They'll embrace the technological change. So that is what I typically think about in terms of principles when we design all these reforms that boost trade, that boost technologies, and so on. So with that, I conclude my discussion and look forward to your questions and comments. Thank you.
Priyanshu, who will be taking the question answers? Avi?
I'll be taking the question
Okay.
answers.
Ma'am, actually, Sukriti will be taking.
Thank you, sir. It has been an highly enlightening speech. And as such, the key takeaways from this, which I would like to make, are structural differences in composition of international trade in terms of comparative advantage and realization of potential through aligned policy formulation, determination of ideal and compatible policy by the nation state to optimize production factors in terms of capital and labor mix, and lastly, ensuring greater coherence of policy making with underlying determinant resource endowments to establish a linkage between growth and employment of the resources examined in the Indian context.
And now I'm sure we have few questions from the audience, which we must have received. So starting off with the first question, sir. Sanchit has asked a question. Sir, as you mentioned about the raising concerns over supply chain bottlenecks throughout the world, India is the best substitute for China as an export source of these countries. Will India gain from this? If yes, how big is this impact going to be, sir?
Are you going to go with all the questions or one by one?
Ma'am, there are around 7 questions that we have.
So you can choose, be precise in terms of if the questions are common, you can skip and you can take the most important one and then, yeah.
Okay, ma'am. So as we can make the precise questions that we can make is, are there sectors of the market that will see less volatility or bounce back sooner? Continuing with the same, what impact will this have on contract workers and those in the gig economy? These are the questions that we could just comprise in one question as they were repeating, sir.
Dr. Badri, are you there? Is he there? Yeah, he's there. I think, yeah. His video and audio has got disabled. So let me see. I mean, let me fix this thing, right? Yeah. Now sir is there. Now I think he could answer. So Pratham, you need to kind of repeat the questions for him. So
Okay.
that would be better, right?
Yes, ma'am. Sure, ma'am. So, sir, continuing with the question that the participants have asked through this session is, the first question that came was, there was a question, are there sectors of the market that will see less volatility or bounce back sooner? Continuing the same, what impacts will this have on contract workers and those in the gig economy, sir?
Yeah, definitely. I think, can you hear me? Yeah. So, if you asked me this question a year ago, I would have said that the industries that are less contact intensive, yes, and that can be carried out remotely and so on, those are the ones that are going to bounce back faster, and that's what happened last year, 2021. So currently, I feel like we have already attained. We have already gone back to pretty much the old type of normal. So that kind of tendency may not be seen that much. The contact intensive industries, recovering less rapidly and so on. Because now it is more like what we call as this, things like revenge travel. People talk about this revenge travel and so on. So where people are really wanting to do all those contact intensive things which were stopped before. So that is happening rapidly. So, but however, this thing that we're doing now, like this kind of remote discussions, remote meetings and so on, those have become like a new normal. So, so in that sense, the digital technologies are going to be, the digital sector is going to be really going up. It's going to continue to go up, and it's a global thing, and India is no exception there. But I think a pandemic has also resulted in a lot of health consciousness. So the health related sectors, healthcare services, and also the nutrition related services, and the allied food and agricultural sectors are also going to be very rapidly expanding, and that's already seen. Other than this, I think maybe tourism can also get a major fillip now, like I mentioned about this revenge travel kind of thing, where you already see the flight tickets, they are so expensive now, and that's because the demand is also high. Of course, I didn't even talk about the other aspects, like the fuel prices increases and so on. Those are again regulating the demand a little bit. All the pent up demand is getting affected a little bit because of the inflation. But in terms of inflation, we are doing much better. India is doing much better than many other countries. So yeah, those are my thoughts on that.
Definitely, sir. I guess the question has been answered by you pretty well to the participant. So the next question in the line is, sir, as you mentioned about the raising concerns over the supply chain bottlenecks throughout the world, India is the best substitute for China as an export source for these countries. Will India gain from this? And if yes, how big is the impact going to be, sir?
Actually, already when you look at the data from the last year, 2021 until early 22, we did a quick analysis there, and we found that India's export share for the first time in the last decade has increased. So India's exports divided by global exports, it was hovering around 1.6%, 1.5 to 1.7% for the past 10 years or so, and now it is slightly more than 1.8%. So that is kind of reflecting what you said. And China's share also has slightly gone down. So in some sense, we have captured some of the exports that are going from China, but we have a long way to go there. Like I was mentioning earlier, we need to boost our scales. We need a lot more investments coming in, and those are all work in progress. One thing that we can be happy about this time compared to the 2017 2018 time period when we had the US-China trade tensions. At that point, a lot of the trade diversion away from China were going to countries like Vietnam and other countries. That is changing now because of many reasons. One reason is our own internal investment policies that have resulted in better business climate here. The second thing is also that many of the companies in China that are relocating to other countries, they are showing a lot of interest in India. So a lot of those investments are coming to India. So this time we are benefiting more from the geopolitical changes than before. So, but a lot more has to be done, and we are doing a lot of work in this regard.
Thank you so much, sir, for answering this question as well. So the last question that we have for this session is, sir, as we know, government slabs windfall tax on domestic crude and additional excise duty on fuel exports. So what will be the trade compromise due to this, and what can we expect in GDP due to this?
So this question is about excise tax, the domestic excise taxes, excise duties.
Yes, sir.
Fuel.
Yes, sir.
So as you have noticed, you may have noticed recently, both the national level excess duties have been cut, and the state level also has. Many states have also reduced taxes, mainly to alleviate the inflation fears. But at the same time, there are different dimensions to this issue. I mean, we are very worried about it now because now the prices are very high, and that is directly having a huge impact on inflation, and we don't want it to skyrocket. To that point, as you may have seen in the news, after a long time, the oil price has come down to less than 100, and we were fearing, like in many of the analysis that I did recently, we are assuming 120, 130, $140 per barrel. That itself is a big sign that it's not going to happen further. So that is one thing to be kept in mind. So that says that the prices are going to stabilize, come down, and hence further reduction in excess duties may not be that important or necessary. But for more important thing to think about it is we should not think in terms of the short-term implications. So what I just told you is a short-term thing, but in the longer term, we are looking at net zero. If you want net zero emissions, what should we do? We should go away from fossil fuels. We should get into renewables. And one important way of doing that is, we have to reduce dependence on fossil fuels by allowing the fossil fuel prices to increase if the market says that it should increase. So we should not artificially keep the prices down just because it's going to increase inflation. So that will lead to gradual shift away from fossil fuels to the renewables. But the good thing is right now we are in a good situation wherein the prices are also coming down globally, and hence the further reduction in excess duty may not be necessary. And your question about the export competitiveness here, it's not a very big issue here because the fuel prices is a global thing. It's not that we are the only ones facing it. So globally, the fuel prices are increasing. So our exports would still be the relative advantage of our exports would still stay. So that's my response to that question.
Thank you so much, sir. And I believe those were the questions that we had for the session. At last, I would like to thank sir a lot because he is not been well and it's very late night in USA as we know. So we are very thankful to you, sir, for joining the session and enlightening us with your information and the insights that we didn't know earlier. We are very thankful to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Now I invite teacher in charge of the Department of Economics, Ranjan Swarnakar, sir. Ranjan, sir, are you there?
Is he not here? Okay, in case he is not here, you can ask Dr. Pragya ma'am to give the vote of thanks, right? Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Sure.
I would now like to invite Dr. Pragya Atri, Assistant Professor of Department of Economics, to convey the vote of thanks.
I think you have to unmute her, and because you have to make her a co-host so that she could speak. And the same is with Ranjan sir. Okay. So if you could do that, that would basically fix the problem.
Yes, ma'am, sure.
Dr. Pragya Atri and Mr. Ranjan
Yes,
Swarnakar. Yeah.
yes, ma'am, done.
So if Ranjan sir is unmuted, he can basically say.
Okay, since my video has not been allowed, it's a pleasure attending this 4-day lectures series by the Financial and Investment Cell of our college. It's really a pleasure, and the lineup of speakers were really very good. So at the outset, I would like to congratulate the entire team of Finance and Investment Cell of our college, LSD College. And on behalf of FIC, LSD College, I would like to congratulate some very few, I would say, noticeable attendees for raising really relevant questions in these lecture series. Okay, so these attendees are our students only. and FIC is glad to award them with a special certificate of appreciation for the same. The names are the following. First, Isha Seth, become honors first year. Then Manav Negi, economics honors first year. And then Sanchit Gupta, econ program first year. And on behalf of FIC ARSD, thank you all for your support. And I would like to see you with more such nice programs in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
You
I
can
would now
unmute
like
that.
to invite Dr. Pragya Atri, Assistant Professor of the Department of Economics, to convey the vote of thanks.
Yeah, hello. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you. So today marks the fourth and the last day of this wonderful webinar on the state of Indian economy, Econ Dialogues, that has been organized by Finance and Investment Cell, ARSD College, under the aegis of IQAC. So I must say that a very apt and relevant area was selected for discussion: the economic ramifications of COVID-19 pandemic, something that we have just gone through. I would believe that it is through. We are already past that. And we had very distinguished speakers like Professor Dipankar Sen Gupta, Dr. Surajit Das, Dr. Anjali Tandon, and today's wonderful session with Dr. B.N. Gopal Krishnan. It was all amazing. All the speakers were amazing, and we got to learn so much. We got to understand so much. The nuances were so much. We could understand better about the economy. So I take this opportunity to congratulate the entire department for successfully organizing this webinar. And first of all, I would like to thank our principal, Dr. Gyantosh Kumar Jha. He's a visionary leader who has always been most receptive to our ideas and has always encouraged us to conduct such events. I sincerely thank you, sir, for being so supportive. I would also like to thank IQAC coordinator, Dr. Vinita Tuli, for her constant support in all our endeavors. I would extend my thanks to Mr. Ranjan Swanakar, Associate Professor, Teacher in Charge, Economics Department, and Ms. Richa Suri Rastogi, Associate Professor, for their wholehearted support. They've been like the plus of our department, and they have supported in all our endeavors. Thank you so much. And then further, I would also thank all the faculty members, then FIC members, Mr. Uttam Kumar, Dr. Naidu, as well as the entire organizing team. Without you people, it wouldn't have been possible. And I would also thank Mr. Ravinder Pant, Associate Professor, Commerce Department, for the technical help. Thank you, Ravinder, for all the technical support that we've been needing from time to time. And my heartfelt thanks to President FIC, Avi Prabhakar, Vice President FIC, Priyanshu, and all the core team members, all of you who just made this possible. And last but not the least, I would like to thank all the students, participants. Because of you, this event was an amazing and a grand success. We look forward to connecting with you guys again. And thank you everyone for participating in this and making it a great event. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Pragya. Thank you, Dr. Badri, for giving your time. And I know it's late night in USA. And thank you so much for the talk and giving your valuable time. Thank you so much.
Now, with a heavy heart and an even heavier head of knowledge gained from this session, I formally bring Econ Dialogues to a close. I thank our speaker, Dr. B.N. Gopal Krishnan, for providing us with such brilliant insights into the aftermath of COVID-19 on trade and investment. I am sure we all learned something here today. Thank you all for joining. Good day and good health to you all.